All right, this message is part 2 in a series on Christmas. So Christmas is Coming is the name of the series. We're looking at the Christmas story this month through a very specific lens, one that is not typical probably. Most people celebrate Christmas by looking at the New Testament stories of Christmas. We're celebrating it by looking at it through the lens of the Old Testament, in particular through the eyes of an Old Testament prophet named Isaiah. Isaiah is widely known to be the greatest of the prophets. He had a very unique perspective on Christmas. Isaiah literally saw Christmas coming 700 years before the birth of Jesus. And I know it's easy to get skeptical about prophecies and things like that. I've been there. I'm a skeptic by nature, and it's easy to say, well, whatever, it just he accidentally got it right, or he stumbled upon it, or whatever explanations we might give. But I'm telling you, I'm going to challenge you, if you're a skeptic, to really look at the prophecies that Isaiah gives and the specificity of the prophecies that Isaiah gave about the coming Christ and his birth that again, happened 700 years after Isaiah walked the earth. It's really wild, objectively crazy, when you think about it. Like, the only thing I could think of to sort of get our heads around it would be if someone today, a prominent figure, was born and someone 700 years ago specifically predicted it. Like, this is going to trigger some of you. I don't mean to at Christmas. I don't want to trigger anybody. Okay, work with me. Donald Trump was born. Okay, Donald Trump was born in 1946. Okay, now imagine that we have on record the written prophecies of someone who lived in the 1200s, a Marco Polo or a William Wallace, who lived in the 1200s, in the Dark Ages, and who went out of their way to write down on a scroll or in a journal or something, I don't know, some way of writing down a prediction of a man who would come with face like polished bronze, with hair that doesn't move. A man who would rise to become the world's most famous apprentice, who would build towers that touched the sky, who would become the world's most powerful man twice. And the second time he would do it with a hole in his ear and blood on his face, saying, "Fight, fight, fight." Like, imagine we had that sort of specific prediction about one who would come, and we have it from 700 years ago. Now, if such a prophecy existed on the record, and we don't have it, but if it did, it would be all anyone talks about. We would all be talking about it all the time. Left, right, center, everybody would be talking about this prophecy. Fox News would be saying, "See, he's the one, it has been foretold." MSNBC would be like, "William Wallace was an insurrectionist too." And everybody would have something to say, but everyone would have to deal with such a specific prophecy. That's the sort of thing we're dealing with Isaiah. There's really no getting around it because he was so specific. To be clear, I'm not comparing Trump to Christ, okay? It's just an illustration. Relax, okay? It's just an example. And I'm just trying to show how amazing a prophet Isaiah really was. He lived during a time of deep darkness. Literal darkness. It was the Iron Age. They couldn't light up the night. They had lamps, but they were expensive. Oil was expensive. And so when the sun went down, darkness came. Everybody knew it was coming, and so they wanted to be indoors by the time it did. But it was more than just literal darkness. In Isaiah's day, there was a spiritual darkness covering the people that Isaiah saw, but they couldn't seem to see. Why? Because when you're in the dark, you don't see it. You don't see yourself in it. It just is dark. Isaiah saw that, God saw that, and it broke his heart to see them so afraid, flailing around in the dark, losing their ever-loving minds. And so this is how Isaiah responded to what he saw among the people. Isaiah chapter 8, verses 5 through 7. in verses 12 through 15. The Lord spoke to me again, because this people has rejected God. Therefore, the Lord is about to bring against them the king of Assyria, a neighboring enemy king, with all of his pomp. Then he wrote in verse 12, do not call conspiracy everything this world calls conspiracy. Now listen, this is for us. It's not just, it's the beauty of prophecy is that it has layers and applications across time. It wasn't just for Isaiah's day, it's for us. Everybody wants to call everything a conspiracy these days. I love a good conspiracy theory. Take me out, get a beer in me, I'll talk your ears off about conspiracies, okay? We can talk about conspiracies, but we have a habit of calling everything this world calls a conspiracy, when really some conspiracies are really just the righteous judgment of God. The righteous judgment of God on people who have lost their way by their own willful action, who have chosen their own darkness over the light God affords. It's just what happens. And it's grace to know that, right? It's not about God just turning on us and hating us or rejecting us because we rejected him. He doesn't. But this is what happens when people choose the darkness over the light. Then he continues, do not fear what they fear, do not dread it. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He's the one you are to fear. No one's as mighty as him. Fear the right one. He's the one you are to dread. He will be a holy place, a sanctuary. That's the real word there in Hebrew. He'll be a sanctuary. Semicolon, new phrase. He will be a holy place, stop. And then for both Israel and Judah, he will be a stone that causes people to stumble and a rock that makes them fall. How can someone or something be both a sanctuary and a stumbling block? Well, if you're in the dark, you don't see it. Even if it is a sanctuary in front of you, you'll still fall over it because you're in darkness. And for the people of Jerusalem, he will be a trap and a snare. Many of them will stumble, they will fall and be broken, they will be snared and captured. Isaiah's message here is that God will be, for us, one of two things. He will be a sanctuary, a safe place, a home of peace. Or he will be something we stumble over, a stone of judgment, a stumbling block. Those are the choices and the only choices that we have to make when it comes to God. Who will God be for us? A sanctuary or a stumbling block? Now, these people of Jerusalem in Isaiah's day, they were walking in the dark. They were choosing the stumbling block over the sanctuary. And that's just what happens when people get too accustomed to and comfortable with the darkness they're in. About 2 years ago, the guys who run the very popular YouTube channel called Yes Theory. They have 9 million followers, a lot of fans. Well, they ran an experiment on their YouTube channel that dealt with darkness. One of the guys on their team agreed to spend 5 entire 24-hour days in a room that was completely dark. That might sound really nice to some of you right now who just had a house full of people for Thanksgiving and you'd like to get away from everyone and just sit in the dark for 5 days, right? Well, don't be fooled. It's not what it sounds like. I mean, darkness is a harder condition than what you might think. And in this room, there was no external light, natural light let in. He had no artificial lights on the inside. They set up night vision cameras that monitored his movements and microphones that could pick up whatever he was saying or singing or screaming, as you'll hear in just a moment. And what they found was it took about 24 hours for him to lose his mind. And he started to descend into the darkness in his thoughts as he sat alone in this pitch black room. Now, you'll be able to see him. Keep in mind, he can see nothing. He is alone in total darkness. Let's watch the clip.
Not even a full 24 hours in, Amar was already struggling with how slowly time was passing, making it very unclear whether he'd be able to make it till the end of his intended 5 days.
Losing my mind, losing my mind. I swear to God, if one of that is just put me singing in this, I'm gonna. This is not for anyone to hear except for you guys. Feel the rain on your so happy, back, Bessie, lily, step on the moon. Don't you wish your girlfriend You've nearly adopted the dog. Nearly adopted the dog. Nearly adopted the dog. That was in my ear. In 4 steps, I hit a wall this way. 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at that. That's my chest. Are you there? How come I didn't think of that before? Poop time! I've lost my mind. I'm surprising myself with my patience. The fact that I haven't gone to that door and just opened it. What time is it? What time is it? Today's the hardest so far. Time's just not passing. I have my moments where I'm like, I got this. And other moments where I'm like, I feel like at some point I'm just gonna open that door and walk out. A wave of sadness just hit me. Oh, I wanna quit so bad.
At the end, it said, he said, I want to quit so bad. And what he didn't know at the time was he thought he had gone a lot further into the experiment, but that was hour 24. The first day, he was already prepared to quit, descending into this deeper and deeper darkness. And if you think he was just acting for the cameras, or if he was, just weak, I want you to know, this is one of hundreds, maybe thousands of other experiments and studies that have been done, and they all show the same results. People who are exposed to total darkness for any length of time almost always tend to lose their minds and lose them quickly. They become disoriented. They lose all sense of time and space. They don't know how much time has passed, and they start to hallucinate pretty early on. Now, I will say in the beginning, they get the best sleep of their lives. The first time they sleep is like, wow, this is amazing. And some of you probably long for that, but soon after, the hallucinations come, voices, they hear voices. He heard, it was quick, but you could see, he was like, are you there? He heard a voice. You hear noises that aren't really there, and your mind plays tricks on you in the dark. And some, the longer the darkness goes on, the more they have things like suicidal ideation and depression setting in. It's a really scary thing to be in total darkness. The fact that this man lost his mind would be no surprise to professional scientists and researchers who study this sort of thing. They've known for generations now that we're not made for exposure to darkness. Like this 2010 study from Time magazine that showed not only are we more susceptible to depression and despair and suicidal ideation and hallucinations, but we also do bad things in the dark more than we would in the light of day. We're more likely, according to this study, to lie and steal and cheat and do other people wrong. We're more likely to cut corners. We're even more likely to make mistakes. And these aren't the willful sort of actions like lying and cheating, but we're more likely to make mistakes. One study looked at medical healthcare workers in Alaska. I don't know if you spend any time in Alaska, but part of the year there's plenty of sunlight. The other part of the year, it's dark most of the time. And they studied healthcare workers in Alaska and found that during those 6 months of darkness, they make more than 50% more mistakes in their healthcare, in their practices, than they do in the light of summer. So it's a lesson to us all. If you're ever in Alaska, have a medical emergency, make sure it's July, I guess, or August when the sun is out, because we make more slip-ups under the cover of night. I remember one time, about a year ago, I think, I took an Uber. I don't often Uber, but every time I Uber, I end up in the most existential conversation with the Uber driver. I don't know why. It's occupational hazard. I just talk to people, and they open up to me. And so I'm talking to this Uber driver, asking him what it's like to drive Uber in Houston. And he said, it's nice. It's okay. It's fine most of the time. He said, it's fine during the day. I don't mind driving people around when the sun is up. People are nice in Houston in the light. And he piqued my curiosity. And so I said, what do you mean? What happens? What goes on? I'm not a late night guy. I don't know what am I missing. And he said, look, I'll drive 10 at night, 11, even midnight. But sometime around 1 or 2, he said, a switch flips in Houston and a new city emerges. It's like zombies climbing out of their graves, he said. And I'm freaking out in the back seat. I'm like, pretending like it's cool, like, yeah, man. But on the inside, I'm like, my Lord, do we have appropriate locks on our doors? Like, he said, all kinds of nefarious actors come out at night. You have your cartel members, your gangsters, you have criminal element, you have pimps and prostitutes, drug dealers, drug addicts, alcoholics, other kinds of folks that are oftentimes not up to anything good. He said, I want to be home by midnight. He said, that's the city that we live in after dark. Which, to me was just another reminder of what I already know because I've read the Bible, and the Bible is clear, start to finish. We're not made to live in the dark. We're not made for darkness. Darkness wasn't made for us. The Bible says that in the beginning, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, but pay attention. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness. Pausing for effect. Pay attention. The earth was formless and empty, darkness covered the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. So here we have a sort of truth, a lesson that we should take to heart. First of all, about darkness. What does this passage show us about darkness? Well, if you read it literally, it's that darkness is empty. Emptiness is dark, and darkness is the result of emptiness, meaning darkness is not a thing. Darkness does not exist. Darkness is nothing except the absence of something. That's what the Bible said darkness was long before Webster ever wrote a dictionary. And now, in our sophisticated understanding, we finally caught up to the Bible, because now if you look at basically any dictionary definition of darkness, it's not the state of something positive or proactive. It is just the absence of something, in particular the absence of light. That's all darkness is. It doesn't exist in its own right. It's just the absence of light. And that's what the Bible said early on. That's what science has caught up to. And so after the beginning, when God made light, a few days later, he made us. Why didn't he make us before that? So we could see him making the light. That'd be cool. He made us after that because he made us to live in the light. He made the light for us. Human beings have always known this. Something about our modern technology and things, it sort of mixes us up, and some people are night people, and some people are day people. Some people are morning people, some people are late night. That's just because we have the tools that we have now, but forever, people have known that nighttime is no time to go out into the elements and be exposed. People knew by sundown you want to be home. And nighttime is to be feared. It's to be avoided. It's to be slept through. And people in antiquity, they knew this, that only the lunatics and criminals and the bravest of men went out at night, and even the bravest of men did that only when necessary. Now we live in a time when, things feel different because we have artificial means of covering up the darkness. Even think about like all the occult practices that go on in the world. Occultism has always been a thing. I'm not freaked out by it or anything. But all sorts of occultism is designed to be practiced under the cover of night. They don't have a lot of, breakfast club for tarot readings. They don't have a lot of, there's 1.5 million witches in the United States, practicing witches, actual practicing Wiccan witches. I'm sure there's a lot more than that. They just don't call themselves Wiccans, and we call them witches. Anyway, there's 1.5 million practicing witches. For reference, there's 1.3 million practicing Presbyterians. That's where we are today. So there's more witches than Presbyterians practicing their faith in America, okay? But I don't know of any, I don't know of any witches coven that's a daylight coven that get up early and watch the sunrise together. All the Wiccan practices, especially their most sacred occasions, are for the longest nights of the year and to be carried out and practiced under the cover of night, because nighttime is for those sorts of deeds. Daytime is for those who are alive. This is how it's always been. But we get confused because we've never known the terror of absolute darkness. We live in Houston, which is always lit up somehow. I mean, the sky glows because the city's so bright. It's hard to get total darkness in Houston, Texas. And if it does get dark, what do? We just turn on the lights. And if the light's too bright, we just dim it a little with our dimmers. And if it's the wrong hue, we can adjust it with our little apps. It's amazing the things we can do with light. And if there's no other light to speak of, we've got these things. We've got flashlights in our pockets. Now, you see? Anybody? Yeah. How about that? Take that, darkness. And so we don't really know what it was like for most of humanity, throughout most of history. But try to imagine with me in this little thought exercise. This is a hypothetical and maybe a little silly, but work with me here. For some reason, for some unknown reason, today in Houston, we find out that all the lights have gone out. These lights, all the artificial lights, for whatever reason, our car lights don't work anymore. Our phones aren't working. It must be some kind of Russian, what's the thing? EMP, yep. And they got us. And so everything, all the lights are out, okay? Everybody's crying conspiracy and all that, okay? It's like, and then the day goes on, and how do you spend that day? If you knew at sundown, Houston would be completely pitch black, dark, how would you spend your day? Probably with some urgency, you would prepare. You would prepare and make sure all your provisions were accounted for and all your family would have everything that they needed to get through the total darkness that was coming. And where would you want to be by sundown? Home. Your sanctuary, your place of peace before the darkness ensued. That's exactly right. And that sort of darkness, that deep darkness, that's what Isaiah saw when he looked around at Jerusalem and the people living in it. He saw them living in darkness, and even more sad than the state of their darkness was their comfort level in it. They were accustomed to it. And over time, they'd come to feel at home in it. And instead of looking for the light of God to show them a way out of it, they were adapting to the darkness. And this is what happens every time we live in darkness instead of light. They started to feel like darkness was their friend. And they decided that darkness was better for them than the light. And the more they decided that, the less at home they felt in the light, the more foreign the light felt to them. And the things that got them in the darkness in the first place, the nefarious deeds, the sins they committed to get in darkness, were only covered up by that same darkness. So the worse their sins got, the darker it got around them. The darker it got around them, the more free they felt to sin. That's the pattern. And that's what these people were doing, even though they were called by God's name, Israel, the people of God. They were his people. He was their God, and now they were rejecting him in favor of their sins and their idols, and they were hiding from him. But the message, the real message of the prophets, as dark as it may seem, is that even in our darkest days, even if we've been in the darkness for a long time, forsaking the light, or maybe even running away from the light of God, he refuses to give up on us. He refuses to just hand us over to the darkness and let us go and have our way. He still shines a light even when we don't want to see it, because that's who he is. That's what we see in Isaiah chapter 9. In chapter 9, verses 1 and 2 and 6 and 7, chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, and then 6 and 7, Isaiah starts with this word in chapter 9, nevertheless. We're going to be in Isaiah for a while now. I want y'all to look for this word and highlight it if you have a highlighter or a pen, or underline it every time you see it. Nevertheless is the most important word in Isaiah, because he's already spelled out the darkness they were in and the trouble they were in and the stupid choices they made. And then he says, nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. These were names for the region around Galilee where Jesus would be raised, where he called home. This is a prophecy, more specificity about Jesus. But in the future, God will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in great darkness have seen a great light. And those living in the land of deep darkness, on them a light has dawned. For to us a child is born. To us a son is given. And the government will be on his shoulders. And he'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. This one baby will be called all these things. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. This is an example of what I meant with the specificity of Isaiah's prophecies about Jesus. Y'all, this is a birth announcement. Birth announcements are as old as human beings in human history. We do them now, we call them gender reveals. Everybody's doing gender reveals, and half of them fail, and we put them on TikTok, and everyone laughs, and everybody has their gender reveals, the birth announcement. It's a human tradition. In Isaiah's day, it was as well. This is a birth announcement, but maybe the weirdest one ever. If Isaiah had TikTok, he would have gone viral with this one, okay? So Isaiah says, there's a baby being born to us, and he's going to be a wonderful counselor. Also, he's mighty God with us in the flesh. And also, he's going to be the Prince of Peace. And also his kingdom, when he sits on the throne, it's never going to end. He's going to be forever. He's going to rule with justice and righteousness forever. And the people are like, whoa, we got to meet this kid. Take us to him. Where's this baby? And Isaiah's like, well, he's not here yet. He's on the way. And they're like, well, who's the mama? And he's like, well, she's also not here yet. She's not been born. And they're like, that's weird. Let's meet his dad. And Isaiah's like, well, that's really complicated. You guys, you know him, but he wouldn't believe me. So, it's the weirdest birth announcement ever, but it's so clearly about Christ who would come 700 years later. No other baby who's ever been born could ever live up to this job description but one. Jesus of Nazareth, Mary's boy, stepson of Joseph, son of God, who still today, 2,000 years after his birth, 1,970 years or so after his death on a Roman cross, still today he sits on his throne, ruling over his kingdom, governing with justice and righteousness. in a kingdom that spreads the world over, across national lines and cultural borders, in every nation and language and in every tongue, among every tribe of humankind. They worship him. We worship him on his throne today. There's no one like Jesus. There's no one who meets the criteria of Isaiah's ancient prophecy. And Isaiah said he came so that we might see the light of God in him. Think with me about the darkest darkness you've known. I know we've got flashlights and generators and everything to keep us from being in the literal dark, but you've been in the dark, haven't you? Whew. I have. I know I have. We all get to the dark places different ways, don't we? Some of you were born into dark circumstances. And maybe you've never even known what the light feels like because all you've known was the darkness because your family growing up was a dark, dark place. And so you were raised in the darkness and it feels like home to you. It's not your home. Or maybe you lived in the light for a while until something happened, some tragedy or unforeseen thing, some untimely death. I've seen that drive someone into the darkness. Some unforeseen divorce. The loss of a child. It's the darkest of all. The loss of a job. The loss of your health and well-being. All these sorts of events can drive you into a dark, dark place, can't they? Maybe you're in a dark place now. It's okay. Glad you're here. It's very likely that no one around you knows you're in the dark and they're in the light, and when they talk, it's like they're speaking a foreign language. You don't know what it's like to live in the light anymore because something pushed you over the edge into the abyss. Maybe you didn't need a push from the outside. Maybe you did it all by yourself. You're like me, and you just chose your way into the darkness because sin felt good for a while, didn't it? Until it didn't. And the thing you used to enjoy now enjoys you as its slave. And it's a dark place. It's a lonely, scary place to be. Whatever that darkness looks like, and however long you've been there, the promise of the Bible, the promise of Isaiah, the promise of Christ, the promise of God remains the same, as efficacious now as ever, is that you were not made for the darkness that you're in. That's why it feels the way that it feels. You weren't made to live in that place. And maybe it's gone on for so long that it feels like a thing. It feels like a thing you're in. It feels like a prison cell that has you. But really, the Bible's reminder is that darkness around you, it's nothing. It's not what it seems. It's nothing. It doesn't even exist. It's an illusion. All it is the absence of light. And at Christmas, we remember that God came in Christ to shine the light in and through the darkest of the dark places. So that those who are without hope are reminded that they, in fact, have a hope, that you and I still have hope. We have a way out. It doesn't take a lot of lights to cancel out the nothingness of darkness. Just a little. Just a little. And if you can see today in your heart of hearts just a little bit of the light of Christ, I just want to urge you and pray alongside of you as you walk toward it. Walk toward it, even if it's been a long time since you lived in the light. Leave behind the darkness you're in. Take the first step out of that addiction. Take the first step out of those secrets. Take the first steps beyond that shame. Walk toward the light of God. And the more steps you take toward it, the brighter that light will get and the more hope you'll see that you have. That's what Christmas is. For you and me, the same choice remains as the people had in Isaiah's day. God will be for you a sanctuary and a home. Or he will be for you a stone of judgment that you'll stumble on and fall because you can't see it in the dark. This Christmas, my prayer for you and for me is that we'll take a step toward home. There's no place like it. You and me were made for it. And God's invitation home, well, is for all of us, regardless of how long we've lived in the dark. Let's pray together. Father, we thank you for your patience with us. Your word implores us to wait on you, but Lord, you've also waited on us for a long time. You've waited for us to see the reality around us, the dark places that we're in, the dark state of this world. And Lord, you've waited for us to see that this darkness isn't our home, that there's something better, that you want us and you love us and you're welcoming us home, God, if we'll just walk toward the light. Thank you for not leaving us to fend for ourselves in the darkness we've been in. Thank you for Christ, your Son, who came, putting on flesh, so that we might know you, experience you, and come home to you. God, we thank you for this promise of hope and light. And I pray for those who are in darkness right now in this room and online to come home at last to the hope that is Jesus Christ, the light of the world. Amen.